Welcome back to IAS Net Study. This is the 24th video in this ethics series, and we are discussing the 5th unit, moral philosophy. In the last video, we had a discussion on evolution of moral philosophy, and in this video, we are going to talk about bird view of moral philosophy, like development of moral philosophy. And maybe one more video, we can finish the development or the bird view of moral philosophy. In the last discussion, we started from Greek philosophy, but here in the bird view, we are going to take up the Indian philosophy also. We are going to start from a Upanishad, and we are going to connect with the Greek philosophy, and in detail we are going to take up the philosophers which have given their contribution to the moral philosophy. And again, it is going to till Renaissance, and then modern philosophies. All these things we are going to cover in the bird view, and in the next cycle we are going to have a detailed discussion of individual philosophers. So let's get into the discussion of this bird view or the development of moral philosophy throughout the world. So initially we are going to take up the Upanishads. Upanishads, what exactly these are? Usually these are spiritual and religious in nature, but Upanishads, these are questioning. Actually, the question and answer, the process is there. And here, even under the blanket of spirituality or the religion aspect, the concept of moral values, the virtues, they are predominantly seen even in the Upanishads also. So it has inspired, it has shaped Hinduism, and it has inspired Buddhism and Jainism also to some extent. There is an influence of Upanishads, and ultimately Upanishads talk about the ultimate reality from a spiritual perspective. It talks about Brahma, it talks about Atma, the individual self and the supreme self, and how it is interlinked. This is fine. This is not somewhere directly, there is no moral or virtues, all these things. But when we talk about individual self and the ultimate reality, it talks about the journey between the two. So it talks about Brahma and Atma. So the journey or the interlink between Brahman and Atma, that is, it is going to explore. In that journey, it talks about the path to human liberation. Human liberation is moksha, salvation. And here it talks about certain virtues. See, in order to move towards this ultimate reality, you need to have a self-realization. Self-realization is the path for your salvation. Self-realization is path for your moksha. And how do you get this self-realization? By having this emotional stability, by controlling your emotions, by controlling your desires, by eliminating ignorance through freedom from ignorance, by controlling or handling your desires in an efficient way. By doing all these things, see, again, there is a spiritual aspect of, the birth, recycle, all these things you can get rid of. This is what it says. But if you look at the core concepts, it talks about emotional intelligence, it talks about emotional stability. So emotional stability, it leads to the self realization. And what is the self realization? It is there is no ignorance, there is no desire, and there is no love, lust, all these things. There is no emotions which affect you in a negative way. So when you reach that stage, it means that you are getting refined. So your negative attributes are leaving your system. So this is how it talks about. Ultimately, even though there is a spiritual religious background aspect to it, aspect to the Upanishads, but if the core philosophies, if you look at it, there are virtues, there are moral philosophy. So it questions, again, it there is a factor of rationality. All these things we can see in the Upanishads, right? Then the next is Jainism. Jainism, again, if you look at the, see, we are going to have a detailed discussion on Jainism in the third cycle. But here, Jainism, if you look at the core philosophy, the moral philosophy it upholds, it is ahimsa, it is non-violence. And another aspect is, it is not only the non-violence in conduct. Of course, it has to be there in your conduct, but even it emphasizes non-violence in your thinking pattern also. Even when you think, there should not be non-violence. So there is a genuine uphold of this virtue of non-violence. It's seen in the Jainism. I don't think we see this in any other faiths or any other practices. So Jainism, even though it is again religious and spiritual in nature, but if you look at the core philosophy, what are the core philosophies? It is a non-violence. Non-violence towards all living beings and also non-living beings. That is also another factor you need to keep in mind. Non-living beings also. And here, non-violence not only your actions, but in your thinking also. So here, the core virtues, if you look at it, it is compassion, it is a respect for life. And again, Jain philosophy stresses spiritual interdependence, and another important virtue here is the equality for all, and not for human beings, for every form of life, even from a small insect to a very big elephant or the human being. So every living form is treated equally here, and it promotes ethical conduct, thought, word, and the action. So ethical conduct, morality is emphasized in everything, your thought, your spoken, whatever you speak, and whatever your actions are. And core principles, again, one of the factors we just had a discussion, that is non-violence. And another core principle is that anekantavada, that is non-absolutism. Non-absolutism, it is nothing but plurality. It means that there are different perspectives. It is not that whatever I am saying, this is the only truth. This is not the concept here. There are multiple truths. So eventually, when you are open for this idea of multiple truth, it means that the concept of plurality is there. Concept of plurality leads to tolerance in society. Tolerance leads to mutual respect in the society. So eventually, it talks about harmony in the society. So you also exist, I also exist, and let us respect each other. So this is the value system. Another virtue given by Jainism is non-absolutism, and then non-possessiveness. Non-possessiveness, usually it is limiting your materialistic tendency or materialistic possessions. But in deep, if you dissect this idea of non-possessiveness, it questions the attributes of greed, it questions the attribute of desire. So the openness, the sacrifice, all these aspects are supported by non-possessiveness. So these are some of the virtues, these are some of the philosophies, these are some of the values emphasized, are supported by Jainism here. So here Jainism combines rigorous ethical discipline with spiritual insights, aiming to achieve liberation through self-purification and the detachment. So these are some of the values we learn, or values given by Jainism. And then another Indian philosophy, that is Buddhism. Buddhism, see, in the evolution we started from Greek philosophies, but here in the bird view we have taken from Upanishads. Once we are done, we are going to take up the we are going to start from a Greek philosophers. Now Buddhism, again, this also talks about liberation. This also talks about self-realization, and here it is called nirvana. And both in Jainism and in Hinduism it was moksha, and here it is nirvana, the path to liberation. Here, in order to achieve this, in order to have the self-realization, it talks about four noble truths, and it talks about eightfold path. You have to follow these four noble truths in your life. You have to implement it. At the same time, you have to follow the eightfold path also. So this is Buddhism talks about. It means that these are values it has given. We are going to see in detail in further. But at this point of time, Buddhism also talks about moral values. It talks about noble truth. It talks about eightfold path, four noble truths, eightfold path. And the core teaching, again, it also tells you to make sure that your conduct is ethical, your conduct is moral, and it gives the way to behave also. And meditation is to control your desires, control your even the thought process also. Meditation, mindfulness is that being that calm, content, satisfaction, all these things. And then reduction of attachment and desire. Again, the core philosophy tells that everything starts from the desire. If you could able to control that desire, ultimately your conduct you can control it. So how do you control your conduct? How to make yourself ethical and moral? By controlling their desire. So this is another core philosophy given by the Buddhism. And Buddhism also stresses the principles of compassion. Even in the Jainism also, the factor of compassion was there. It also talks about non-violence. It also talks about interdependence of all being. Interdependence, again, it is mutual respect, tolerance, all these things, harmony. So all these aspects, harmony, all these aspects are supported by Buddhism also. Again, if there is a question of what are the moral philosophy supported by Buddhism, same thing, the virtues of the compassion, non-violence, tolerance, plurality, and controlling the desire, uh, rightful conduct, all these things you can write it in the examination. So Buddhism. And then next is, let's talk about epics also. Even though these considered as stories, these are in the format of stories, but still there is a lot to learn from these epics also. These epics also focuses on ethical conduct and the moral behavior. And the two important, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ramayana, if you look at it, it talks about duties, it talks about responsibilities. Responsibility for duties and responsibility of individual person, duties and responsibility of a king. All these things you can see it from a different perspective. And it talks about how exactly you have to fulfill your duties within the relationship. There are certain characters, whether character of Rama, character of Sita, Lakshmana, all these characters, if you analyze, if you understand these characters, they portray certain value system, they portray certain virtues. Ultimately it is uh, winning of goodness over evil. Even this value of goodness, there are a million branches under it, and every single character in this the Ramayana, you understand the virtue of that particular character. Ultimately it is trying to tell you to be ethical, it is trying to tell you to be moral, and with examples through these kind of characterization. So perfect brother, perfect father, servant, wife, king, see, these are some of the different ways to look at the one single person can be seen in a different perspective. So as a brother, as a father, as a wife, so as a king, so from a different perspective we are seeing one particular person, and we are deriving these moral values from these stories. So Ramayana, and then again Mahabharata, what you learn from the Mahabharata, the four goals of life, the purusharthas, that is described, that is explained through story format in Mahabharata. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma is duty, the right conduct, and then Artha is wealth, and then Kama is desire, Moksha is liberation. So Purushartha, that you need to follow all these things, and you need to eventually, by fulfilling all these things, eventually you reach towards self-realization. So these are your responsibilities, these are your duties again here also, and these are purushartha, these are the goals of life. Fulfill these duties to eventually go for a realization. Again Mahabharata also the same thing, duties and responsibilities. And in that Mahabharata there is a Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, again, it is considered as a guidance, especially to be moral, to be ethical, spiritual practices, and again it leads towards the self-realization. When you are self-realized, it means that you are fulfilling your duty, you are following the moral conduct. And both these epics, they serve as guiding texts for moral, ethical, and spiritual conduct, shaping Indian thoughts for centuries. So these are epics. Now let's go to the Western, now the Greek civilization. Now let's talk about moral philosophy from the whatever we see in the evolution. Let's start from that. So now let's go to the Greek philosophers. Now I told you that initially it started from seven sages of Greece. They give that push factor, or they talked about this moral philosophy in their discourse. But the thing is, even though there is a we usually say that philosophical moral philosophy, the discourse started from them, but the concept of mythology, the concept of religion, spirituality, it was there predominantly, that overpowered the moral discourse. But still we could able to derive some of the moral philosophies also through their teaching. Thales, uh, he is one among the seven sages, and the time period 624 to 546 BC. Usually, see, the examination, they are not going to ask about the time period and all, but I am giving you the reason is it would be easier for you to connect what time period, what kind of ideology was there, and which time period this ideology changed and new ideology entered into the picture, new social norm entered into the picture, so that it would be easier for you to connect. That is the reason I am giving you the time period also. Here the Thales, the time period, you can go through with it. And Aristotle, uh, he considered Thales as the first philosopher in the Greek tradition. See, usually before that it was mythology, it was spirituality, it is more religious in nature. But the seven sages, especially the Thales, the rationality or the logical reasoning enter into the picture. Before that, whatever the ancestors they were doing, they were following. Now the new thinking has entered along with this mythology and the spirituality. Rationality also entered into the picture, and this rationality has changed the moral discourse. This rationality has changed the moral philosophy of the West here. So here rational thought, here in the Thales discourse, he sought to explain the natural world through the rational thought rather than mythology. So, and he told that everything, the basic foundation of our existence or the universe, it is the water. This is what he told, and everything originated from water. But here, what you have to focus is here the idea of rationality over mythology. That is the factor you need to remember with respect to the Thales here. And he laid the foundation of natural philosophy and tradition of seeking rational explanation for the universe. So logical explanation, rational explanation, objective explanation, that started from Thales. That is the reason Aristotle says that he's considered as the first philosophers in the Greek tradition. And Thales emphasized observation, reasoning, and there is a shift. Before that, I told you that it is mythological explanation. Zeus, all these mythological explanation characters were there to explain what to do, what is right, what is wrong, all these things. But now, from him onwards, it is a rational, it is a logical reasoning that came into the limelight. So that was used to give explanation for the creation of universe, for the working of universe. So the idea of rationality entered into the picture with respect to morality, right? Now the next important philosopher, it is Pythagoras. Pythagoras, again, their time period is 570 595 BC. Here also Pythagoras, let me go back. Yes, again Pythagoras, he was a philosopher, but along with a philosopher, he was a mathematician also. So here there is a combination of philosophy, mathematics, and the spirituality. And he told that with the help of mathematics, we can understand philosophy, we can understand spirituality also. And he believed that universally it is fundamentally structured by numbers. If you want to understand the universe, you have to understand the maths. When you understand the maths, you can interlink, you can, these mathematical principles, they give you the idea of moral principles also. The basic questions of universe are answered by mathematical principles. So his approach is something different. So in Thales, it is rationality. In Pythagoras, it is mathematical principles. He emphasized mathematical principles. And he told that these mathematical principles, they reveal underlying harmony and order of reality. Now to understand the universe and the origin, all these things, what you have to focus on the mathematical relationship. It is quite radical at that point of time, but different point of view. That is, this is what I'm trying to say. So he combined ethical, religious, and philosophical ideas with mathematical inquiry. So first, one person tried to add rationality theories, and another person came and he gave the new idea. New idea is mathematical principles. After that, the new principles came, and the new philosophers, they tried to add scientific temper or scientific inquiry into the philosophy. See that this is how the chain of event, this is how the trigger changes. Once the Thales concepts are accepted, now the new thinking, new thought process entered, that is mathematics, principles of mathematics. Once mathematical principles accepted, next philosophers came, next philosophers gave the idea, and in the next philosophies, they talked about scientific management or scientific inquiry into the philosophy. So this is how the changes, the chain of events. And then his country, the Pythagoras idea contributed to the development of mathematics also, not only the philosophy, mathematics also, as a key tool for understanding cosmos, and inspired later Greek philosophers like Plato. Right? This is with respect to Pythagoras. Then, now come to the eastern side, Oriental philosopher, that is Confucius, and the time period is 551 to 479 BC. Right? He's a Chinese teacher, he's an editor, he's a politician, again, he's a philosopher. Now, the principles given by Confucius, it is called Confucianism, and is considered as founder of Confucianism. And here, the core ideas or the principle given by Confucius, the first one is harmony. There should be harmony in society. How are we going to get harmony in society? One thing is, there should be harmony inside the home. When there is a harmony inside the home, the same thing can be seen at a social level. When there is a harmony in a community, we can see the harmony in the country. So harmony is one of the basic virtues or basic values. So that he emphasized, he talked about gen is considered as a humanity, goodness. This is another core principle, or he usually mentions it as a highest moral ideal that is required, and everybody can achieve this. Is if I want to be moral, the basic thing I need to have is humanity and the goodness. So we talked about harmony. The core philosophical the value supported by Confucius is harmony, and the humanity and goodness. And I told you about the harmony. How do you see harmony within a home, within a family? How do you see that? Through the family loyalty, through the ancestor worship, through by respecting elders. But one thing is that yes, I follow my ancestors, whatever they're doing, I'm following. But here he told one thing, that see, I'm telling you to respect elders, telling you to respect the tradition, all these things, fine. But at the same time, you have to accept it by questioning. It is not that blindly don't follow anything. Question it, understand it, then you follow it. Then only it becomes moral. Or else you're blindly following, you're not questioning anything. So he told that follow the rituals, follow the rites, follow the tradition, it is fine. I support that. But at the same time, he told that there should not be any blind obedience. You follow that, but at the same time, you question it, you understand it. If you think that it is true, then you follow it. So he was against the blind obedience. Again, there is a factor of rationality. logical reasoning. So he talked about harmony were first, he talked about logical reasoning second, he talked about humanity and goodness, right? And he told that, see, individual one family is the foundation of ideal governance. If there is a harmony, if there is a goodness within the one particular family, again it can be seen at a social level in a community, and again the same thing can be seen at a national level or the country level. So family is considered as a foundation for governance. So here you are connecting philosophy with the politics, connecting philosophy with the governance. And another famous principle, that this is a very famous principle, and if you look at the origin, it goes to Confucius. Do not do to others what you do not want to done to yourself. The golden rule is a very famous one. This famous principles, the origin goes to the Confucius. Right. Let's see the core principles or the virtues given by. You don't have to remember these terminologies, Jen, Yi, Li, Chi, Shi, and all these things. But remember the principles. What are the principles? Humanity, compassion, truthfulness, integrity, and correct conduct, social ritual, propriety, knowledge and wisdom, trustworthiness, reliability. These are the core virtues of or values of Confucius, right? And again, Confucius ethics are essentially humanistic, focus on cultivating moral character, promoting social harmony through the ethical living. So this is with respect to Confucius. Now, the next important philosophy, Sophism. Sophists are usually they are teachers, and usually these sophists, sorry, they were teaching young statesmen, the rich individuals, or the members of our noble families, members of nobility. Usually they used to teach for payment. But what is the unique thing here? Unique thing is that they gave the concept of ethical relativism. So morality is subjective. Till now, if you look at it, there are some certain virtues. If you look at the Greek philosophies, certain virtues are there. And even if you look at the Confucius, like truth, goodness, humanity, all these things, they talked about it. Till now, everybody is talking about uh, universal value. There are certain values everybody has to follow. These kind of teachings we are seeing now. Sophists, they give the different idea, that ethical relativism. Here they told that morality, it is subjective in nature. Whatever, see, if you look at the Indian, we had a discussion of this moral relativism in the first unit also. Moral relativism, ethical nihilism, and moral absolutism, all these things we have had a discussion. So the concept of ethical relativism, moral relativism, it is given by sophists. Again, here the moral philosophy, the discourse has been changed. Till now, there are standards. Truth, everybody should be truthful, and compassion, humanity, goodness, all these things. These are the standard values. Everybody has to uphold. Everybody has to follow. Now the discourse has changed. Now they are telling that morality is subjective in nature. It changes from time to time. It changes from civilization to civilization. It changes from one country to another country, right? So, and sophism emphasize practical skills, persuasive speech, the art of debate, rather than searching of absolute philosophical or ethical truth. They rejected that there is one ethical, the moral truth, universal truth. There is no concept like that. Morality is subjective in nature. It differs from person to person at maybe the time period. So the here what you have to focus is ethical relativism, right? I think this is it for this video. I will take up the further rest of these philosophers and philosophies in the next video. And once we are done with Birdview, we are going to take up the detailed discussion of these individual philosophers. And thank you so much for listening. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good day.